This is the full breakdown of Ukraine's October 6th drone offensive, an operation that reshaped the battlefield in Crimea.
On October 6, 2025, at exactly 0023, two bright fireballs tore through the night sky above Saki Airport in Novorivka, located on the western coast of the Crimean Peninsula. This was no ordinary attack. It was the opening note of a massive, carefully orchestrated operation aimed at crippling Russia's southern flank. When the sirens began blaring at the Russian Black Sea Fleet Command Center in Sevastopol, radar screens lit up with dozens of targets approaching from the west and north of the peninsula. Each dot on the screen was a threat. This was the sound of an army of 63 unmanned aerial vehicles and 3 missile drones, each serving a different purpose, taking off from multiple points in Ukraine. The Russian lieutenant general in command of the Integrated Air Defense System, IADS, in Crimea did not hesitate. He gave the order, "Engage all targets!" This was exactly the reaction the Ukrainian planners had anticipated. S-400 batteries, Pantsir S-1 and Tor M1 systems launched a missile barrage that lit up the sky. However, each interceptor missile launched was a step toward closing the trap's steel jaws. Most of these missiles were heading toward a trap. The backbone of this first wave was 48 low-cost, high-speed, small-payload decoy UAVs. These platforms were more of an economic and psychological argument than a weapon. They were mass-produced, simple designs with composite bodies that absorbed rather than reflected radar waves. Modified commercial drones and even less sophisticated platforms like the aging UJ-22 Airborne were reconfigured for one-way missions. Their tasks were simple but vital: to saturate the Russian air defense system, deplete its valuable interceptor missiles, and most importantly, force it to reveal itself. As the air defense batteries around Saki and Kacha airfields, Sevastopol, Simferopol, and Yevpatoria picked off this swarm of decoys one by one. Each successful hit was actually a strategic loss. More importantly, each missile launch provided Ukraine's signals intelligence, SIGINT units, with an invaluable data package: the battery's exact location, the frequency range of its engagement radar, and its reaction time. Russian air defense was mapping itself. Russian generals began preparing their reports, believing they had successfully repelled a major attack. But this was merely a diversion. What was actually happening was akin to a chess master deliberately allowing his opponent to see all his potential moves. The real hunters were approaching silently and low in the electronic and physical shadows created by this chaos. The Russian air defense network had swallowed the bait and fallen into the trap. The corridors were now open for the main strike force. Behind this veil of chaos, from a secret launch site near Odessa, the deadliest hunters of the night began their journey of approximately 300 kilometers. 2 heavy Peklo missile drones and 4 UJ-26 Bober drones carrying 50-kilogram warheads. Simultaneously, 4 lighter AQ-400 scythes took off from a point closer to the Kherson front line. The genius of the plan was based on flawless timing that would allow these platforms, with their different speeds and ranges, to converge over the target within seconds after a flight of hundreds of kilometers. Traveling at approximately 200 kilometers per hour, the Bober's journey would take nearly 2 hours. The Peklo, reaching speeds of 700 kilometers per hour, would arrive at the target in 35 to 40 minutes. Therefore, the slower Bober missiles were launched much earlier, their timing perfectly synchronized with the arrival of the Peklo and Scythe missiles. This was a 4-dimensional battle plan designed to make the enemy's decision-making cycle impossible, going beyond simple timing. At 1:45, the main striking force was approaching the western coast of Crimea. To evade radar, they were advancing just 30 to 50 meters above the sea surface, surfing between the waves. This altitude meant they were below the radar horizon of Russia's main air defense radars, such as the 91N6E Big Bird system in the S-400. For these radars, the low-flying drones simply did not exist, hidden by the curvature of the Earth. As they approached the peninsula, a Krasika 4 system in the area created a wide-spectrum GPS jamming zone. Systems like Krasuka 4 could create a jamming bubble over hundreds of square kilometers, completely blinding global navigation satellite systems, GNSS, like GPS. This was a deadly threat to a standard UAV or missile. However, these platforms were designed for this very moment. The flight computers instantly rejected the corrupted satellite signal and switched to the primary guidance system. the Inertial Navigation System, INS. This was one of the most critical moments of the plan. Russia's biggest trump card, electronic warfare, was rendered ineffective with a single software command. Using high-precision ring laser gyroscopes and accelerometers, they continued to maintain their course with millimeter precision, even without GPS. They were flying blind, but they were not lost. As the smokescreen closed, the real striking force of the operation took center stage. This was not a random attack, but a surgically precise operation designed to paralyze the Russian logistics ecosystem, fuel, transportation, ammunition in Crimea. Before reaching the main target, the supporting elements had to be eliminated. The first surgical strike of the operation was directed at the Ivazovskaya train station, the railway artery leading to the logistical heart of Fedosia. This station was a critical junction where fuel from the oil terminal was loaded onto railway tankers and sent to the front. 3. AQ-400S CYU AVS modified with 30-kilogram warheads that were lighter but more penetrating were directed at this target. While air defenses were focused elsewhere, these 3 drones infiltrated at low altitude. The first UAV targeted the station's administrative building and signaling center, crippling command and control. The other 2 physically damaged the railway tracks by targeting the switches and rails. Although the attack did not cause a major fire, it achieved its objective. The railway connection between the Feodosia terminal and the southern front was severed. Simultaneously, another deadly package was approaching a different target deep inside Crimea. This target was the main ammunition depot belonging to the 18th Combined Arms Army fighting on the Kherson and Zaporizhia fronts. The force assigned to this attack consisted of 4 specially modified UJ-26 Bober and 1 Peklo missile drone. Instead of standard warheads, the Bober drones were equipped with 50-kilogram powerful explosives that increased their destructive power many times over, albeit at the cost of slightly reduced range. The air defense's attention was still distracted by the decoy targets. The striking force infiltrated at low altitude. The first Bober breached the perimeter defense of the storage area and plunged into one of the main buildings. Seconds later, the other Bober missiles and finally the Peklo missile drone with its massive 120-kilogram warhead struck the target. Peklo's imaging guidance activated in the terminal phase used preloaded satellite images to identify the point where ammunition boxes were most concentrated and directed its strike there. The result was, in a word, apocalyptic. Hundreds of tons of artillery shells, Grad rockets, and S-300 missiles detonated simultaneously. A massive fireball lit up the night sky, and the seismic shockwave was felt kilometers away. In a single night, the 18th Army's fist was not broken. It was vaporized. While all these attacks were taking place, the spearhead of the operation was making its final approach to the lifeblood of Crimea, the Feodosia oil terminal. This package, consisting of a total of 10 platforms, including 4 AQ-400 Scythe 30-kilogram warhead, 4 UJ-26 Bober 50-kilogram warhead, and 2 heavy Peklo missile drones, 120 kilograms plus warhead, was designed to stop Russia's war machine in the south. Due to the general state of alert on the peninsula, the lower-tier air defense around the terminal systems like Pansier opened fire. A Pansier battery locked onto an approaching Bober and a 57 E-6 missile capable of speeds of approximately 1,300 meters per second was launched into the night sky. For the operator, this was a successful interception. He was in control. However, as the missile progressed toward its target, the nightmare scenario unfolded. The tactical display suddenly filled with 5, 6, 7 new targets appearing almost simultaneously from the west, southwest, and northeast. The system was now facing a logic crisis. However, the passive radar detector RWR on the Bober instantly detected this lock and activated the mini EW pod. The clear lock on the Russian operator's screen suddenly became blurred. In the midst of this electronic duel, 1 Scythe and 2 Bober were shot down in the ensuing clash. However, the remaining 7 strike assets were locked onto their targets. First, an AQ-400 Scythe struck the first fuel tank, acting as a penetrator to weaken the thick steel construction. Immediately afterwards, a second Scythe and the first Peklo missile with a 120-kilogram warhead struck the same point within a second of each other. The armor reached saturation point and the massive tank turned into a fireball. Simultaneously, an AQ-400 Scythe and a second Peklo missile performed a similar sequential strike on the second fuel tank. A second massive explosion lit up the night. Meanwhile, there is a donation campaign for Ukraine by United 24 in the video description. If you want to take part in the fight for freedom, we are waiting for your support. Now, let's get back to our main topic. Finally, two UJ-26 Bober missiles, which flew slower but carried heavier 50-kilogram warheads. And the last AQ-400 Scythe took advantage of the chaos created by the first two explosions and headed for the third tank. Although the total amount of explosives hitting this tank was not normally sufficient, the chain reaction and intense heat from the explosions of the first two tanks triggered the third tank to ignite. Within 10 seconds, the heart of the Feodosia terminal was pierced by a total of over 500 kilograms of high explosives, each precisely targeted. The result was an inevitable inferno. By 2:30 a.m., the flames were so high they could be seen from dozens of kilometers away. NASA firm satellite imagery confirmed multiple large fires at the terminal's location. The intensity of the fire necessitated the evacuation of approximately 250 to 300 civilians from nearby residential areas. Initial reports as always spoke of an accident, an industrial accident, a leak, a static electricity discharge, human error. This is the system's first line of defense, assuming the predictable, the manageable. But at the same time, three chains of confirmation converged to shatter this comforting scenario. The first were the initial reports leaked from official channels controlled by the Russian Ministry of Defense, which confirmed the strike in a panic. The second were the emergency bulletins that international news agencies ran under headlines like "Major Fire in Theodosia." The third and most definitive were the cold digital data captured by thermal imaging satellites in orbit, indisputably recording the size of the flames and the massive column of smoke. A facility worth millions of dollars, protected by Russia's most advanced and layered air defense systems, considered one of the country's most secure strongholds, was engulfed in flames within minutes. This was not a malfunction. This was an attack. On the night of October 6th, the Russian Ministry of Defense issued a statement claiming that more than 40 UAVs had been destroyed over Crimea. This figure could have been technically accurate. However, it was an admission of failure, not success. Because in asymmetric warfare, the measure of success for the defender is 100%, meaning stopping all threats. For the attacker, the measure of success is 1%, meaning just one platform reaching its target. That night, Russia's million-dollar missiles may have hit dozens of cheap UAVs, but what mattered was not what was hit, but what was not hit. The results of the operation went far beyond the burning tanks in Crimea, creating systemic shockwaves throughout Russia's war machine. The Feodosia maritime oil terminal was not just a storage facility inherited from the Soviet era. This facility, one of the Black Sea's most strategic fuel and ammunition transfer centers, was the beating heart of Russia's military operations on its southern front. With its enormous capacity of 250,000 tons, this facility was the main center supplying fuel to Russian troops in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia by rail, sea, and road. It stored not only crude oil, but also special products that brought every part of the war machine to life. Diesel fuel that powered the advance of T-90M and T-72B3 tank units. TS-1 jet fuel that kept the K-52 Alligator attack helicopters and Su-25 Frogfoot close air support aircraft dominating the battlefield in the sky. And most importantly, the heavy marine fuel that determines the range of Kalibra cruise missiles, launched from the Admiral Grigorovich-class frigates of the Black Sea Fleet and the projection of Russia's naval power. A single day's interruption at this terminal could have the operational tempo of a tank brigade at the front, limit the number of sorties by an air regiment, and disrupt a fleet patrol plans. But Feodosia's importance extended beyond military logistics. This facility was a perfect example of the modern strategy known as dual-use infrastructure. The same pipelines and storage tanks supplied electricity to civilian settlements in Crimea and fuel to armored units at the front. A strike here would not only slow down the military wheel, but also disrupt the rhythm of civilian life, creating regional instability. Therefore, destroying this hub meant not only clogging the Army's circulatory system, but also paralyzing the enemy's military and civilian nervous systems at the same time. This attack turned the already existing fuel crisis in Crimea into a complete collapse. Even before the attack, about 50% of gas stations on the peninsula had stopped selling gasoline. With Feodosia out of commission, fuel began to be rationed for both the civilian population and the occupying army. Tanks, armored vehicles, and trucks began to sit idle at their bases, unable to refuel. The effects of the disaster in Feodosia were not limited to military logistics. For the people of Crimea, this attack was the moment when the war transformed from an abstract concept into a concrete reality that directly affected their daily lives. Long gas lines, rising food prices, and constant air raid sirens created an atmosphere of panic and insecurity on the occupied peninsula. Russia's propaganda narrative, which presented Crimea as an impregnable fortress, was reduced to ashes amid the flames of burning oil tanks. At the same time, the closure of airports in 8 different regions of Russia and power outages in cities such as Belgorod sent a clear message to the Russian people that the war was no longer confined to Ukrainian territory. Russia was well aware of the absolute importance of this strategic asset and had mobilized its best technology to protect it. That is why Crimea was home to one of the world's most dense and sophisticated integrated air defense systems, IADS. This was a layered defense philosophy rather than a single system, with components communicating with each other and covering each other's weaknesses. It was a modern 21st century manifestation of the Soviet doctrine developed during the Cold War to counter NATO cruise missiles and stealth aircraft. At the pinnacle of this philosophy was the S-400 Triumph system, the brain and eyes of the network. It was also supported by lower and mid-tier air defense systems. In theory, this system was impenetrable. The doctrine was flawless. The S-400 would see, transmit the data, and the Pantsir and Tor would destroy. Each layer would cover the gaps of the previous one. However, the backbone of this operation was not a $1 million stealth aircraft or a hypersonic missile. On the contrary, the weapon of this operation was a physical manifestation of modern asymmetric warfare philosophy, a long-range one-way attack unmanned aerial vehicle developed by Ukraine using its own resources. This weapon was the 21st century equivalent of David's slingshot. It relied not on brute force, but on intelligence, cost-effectiveness, and the ability to subvert the enemy's expectations. The design philosophy of these platforms can be summed up in one word: expendability. While a single S-400 interceptor missile costs millions of dollars, the production cost of one of these UAVs was in the tens of thousands of dollars. This economic asymmetry created an equation where the aggressor, willing to lose dozens of UAVs, forced the defender to waste just one missile. This was a war of attrition. However, it was not steel that was being worn down, but the enemy's economy and ammunition stocks. Ultimately, this operation marks a significant evolution in Ukrainian military strategy. It demonstrates a mature capability in planning and executing complex operations that integrate intelligence, deception, and multi-platform precision strikes. This single operation will necessitate a fundamental reassessment of Russian air defense doctrine globally. This attack will serve as a definitive case study on the power of massed unmanned systems. Thank you for choosing us. The targets mentioned in this operation story, such as the Saki Air Base, Kacha Air Base, 18th Army Ammunition Depot, cities across Crimea, the train station, and most importantly, the Feodosia refinery, are entirely real. Furthermore, these targets were under attack by Ukrainian forces at the specified times. Our operational narrative was prepared based on analysis by our technical experts of official data from the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, as well as verified images from social media.